Hi, I'm Thea Jirak. Welcome back to the Glory Be Block of the Month program. Today we're making block 3. Block 3 is the block that surrounds and makes the chain that goes all the way around our quilt. It's made very easily, and I'm going to show you how to take the components and put them all together. If you pull your block 3 bag with all of your backgrounds out, you'll have some strips of background fabric, and if you read your pattern, you'll have cut some strips of colored fabric. We're going to sew these together along one edge, and this is a block where it's very important for you to have what's known as a scant 1/4 inch seam. If you take these two strips and sew them together with a larger than 1/4 inch seam, your blocks are going to be too small. Let me show you what that looks like. This is a 2-inch strip sewn to a 2-inch strip. When we sew these two together, what we should get is a 3.5 inch segment. Once we put those segments together, we should get a 3.5 inch block. By sewing less than or a scant 1/4 inch seam, when we press these strips open, they'll actually go to the full 3.5 inch measurement. If you sew a full 1/4 inch seam and you press these open, your blocks will be less than 3.5 inches. Your strips will be less than 3.5 inches wide. Many of you have a 1/4 inch seam guide on your sewing machines. You want to make sure and test a scrap piece of fabric so that when you press your scraps open, and you sew a 2-inch piece of scrap strip to a 2-inch piece of scrap strip, it actually opens up after pressing to a full 3.5 inch measurement. Once you've sewn your strips together and pressed them open, they'll look something like this. Again, remember to press your seams to the darker fabric. Press them away from your background. You're going to take and subcut these strips into 2-inch sections. You'll have your sections laid out. Take every other section and just turn it the other direction. You can just flip it over with the right sides together. What you want to watch for here is that your seams are snugged together. The other thing that you'll notice is because we pressed both of them to the dark, they'll actually be what we call opposing seams, and they'll fit very nicely together. I usually just take a pin, and if you'll notice here, I've taken this pin and I've put it in on one side of the seam, and it comes out on the other side of the seam. This helps make sure that those seams stay snug when you sew them together. Again, we're going to use a scant 1/4 inch. You're going to sew just a little bit less than a 1/4 inch so that, again, when we press this open, it's going to open up to 3.5 inches square. You want to make sure that that seam underneath doesn't turn. And as you get to the pin, just take it out and keep sewing. We've sewn our 2 pieces together, and when we open it up, it's a 3.5 inch square. One of the things I want to show you on the back, this is what's called a 4-patch. Because we have 4 pieces of fabric together, it's a 4-patch. When you make 4 patches, if you turn them over, the last seam that you sewed, if you'll pull the threads out up to that seam, the back will do what we call pinwheeling. And the center of that seam actually lays flat and open. Once you've done that with all of your pieces and you lay them down, you just want to double check and make sure that they're exactly 3.5 inches square. It never hurts to double check your work. Once we have all our squares made, you'll see that I've laid them out on a board, and this is the easiest way to put these together. You're going to make 12 of these blocks. What I noticed when I made this block is that this corner square has a mind of its own, and it always seems to want to turn the wrong direction. So by laying it out on a board like this, you can make 12 stacks that look like the one on my board and sew all 12 blocks, making sure that you have them in the right direction. What you'll notice here is that there are 9 pieces of fabric. We're going to sew them in rows. We're going to sew this as row 1, this as row 2, and this as row 3. When we have those rows done, we're going to sew them together. You want to check your pattern for pressing instructions. We've told you exactly which way to press each of these squares so that your quilt block turns out flat as can be. Once you have your rows sewn together and pressed, you're going to have 12 blocks done, and you can take all 12 blocks and set them aside with the blocks that you made in month 1 and month 2. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you next month, and happy quilting.